Hi class. This week we're going to be talking about two perspectives that really came out of and were further developed out of the neoclassical school of thought around management and organizations. The human relations movement and the behavioral movement. The human relations movement really arose from the work of several sociologists and social psychologists who concern themselves with how people relate and interact within a group. And then the behavioral movement came from psychologists who focused on the individual behavior of employees. So to better understand these movements, we're going to take a look at the work of some of the sociologists and psychologists that influenced this thought and this school. So some of the major assumptions of really it's organizational behavior, but it also includes human relations, is that unlike in the classical thinking, organizations exist to serve human needs rather than the other way around. So this perspective really looks at why organizations exist and how they operate most effectively from the perspective of looking at how they meet the needs of humans and how human interaction impacts the effectiveness and productivity of organizations. This model also looks at the reciprocal interaction between organizations and people, understanding that they need each other. You can't have a successful organization without having successful employees, and vice versa. This model also has as a major assumption that there is a fit that happens between individuals and the organization. And when this fit is poor, one or both, the organization or the individuals, will suffer. Individuals will be exploited or will seek to exploit the organization. When there's a good fit between the individual and the organizations, then you'll find employees who find their work meaningful, satisfying, who are motivated to do their very best and to help the organization to accomplish organizational goals and mission. So the human resource or the human relations theories seem to come out of what is called the Hawthorne studies. And really what happened, and you have a little video about the Hawthorne studies, was that they were looking really from a classical perspective to see how they could better make productivity out of their organization. How could they increase the efficiency of the workers so that they could produce more product more effectively, more efficiently? So they began to look at things like lighting and environmental things that they thought may have an impact. And what they found, unlike what they thought they would find, was that the mere presence of researchers and people looking at how workers were doing what they were doing, the conversations that workers had with these researchers, that those interactions increase productivity. So out of those studies, it came to be that workers were no longer seen as just kind of units of production. Rather, they were seen as social entities who improved productivity as you met those social needs. So people were seen as not passive or resistant, but that people, if put in those boxes, learned that behavior. That if you allow people to have some responsibility for their work, to find satisfaction in their work. If you talk to them about what their goals were and what they thought was important about their work, that really they would do better work. And so out of this, the task of the manager really became to arrange not only environmental conditions, but arrange things like meeting the needs of the people who work for them, understanding what motivated individual workers to get their work done, so that they could use those factors and help satisfy those needs and get the best out of the employees that they had with them. So Mayo, who did the Hawthorne studies, talked about the Hawthorne effect. And basically the Hawthorne effect is also referred to as the observer effect. And it's a reactivity in which individuals modify an aspect of their behavior in response to their awareness that they are being observed. So just the very fact that they're being observed, that they're being researched, and that they have an opportunity to be involved in that research help to make them more productive and their workplace more satisfying. So the article in this chapter that you're reading is about Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, and how that relates to this human resource behavioral perspective on organizations is that human needs underlie human motivation, and that needs that are unmet create momentum or motivate people to seek to get those needs met. Once those needs are met, then they no longer become motivating. So satisfied needs are not motivators. Rather, those needs that have not been met become motivation for people in their behavior and in terms of organizations in their work. So we know that there are 5 levels of needs, starting with physiological needs, survival needs, food, clothing, shelter, etc. And that only when those needs can be met can people look to or be driven by needs such as love, social needs, esteem, etc. And so that's Maslow, and you'll read more about how that applies to organizations in terms of really having managers and leaders look at what kinds of things motivate their employees and how can they shape the environment of their organization so that those needs can be met, or at least sought out to be met. Another theorist in this frame, and really McGregor comes more from a human behavior perspective, a psychological perspective rather than a sociological perspective, is Douglas McGregor's description of the impact that the assumptions or the perspective of the manager about their workers and what motivates them or does not motivate them can become self-fulfilling. So he talks about theory X and theory Y managers, really. Theory X categorizes some of the assumptions that come under scientific management. So in theory X, for instance, people are seen as basically lazy, that they must be externally motivated, that they dislike work, etc. And then theory Y managers tend to think that workers are more self-directed, self-controlled, enjoy work, but enjoy finding what they find satisfying in work, and that you can motivate people to be more productive in work if you can find out what those are. So a little bit more about McGregor's theories. Here we see kind of it laid out in terms of theory X assumptions and theory Y assumptions. And remember, the importance of these theories is really that it talks about what actions or what perspectives managers have and how they structure the work environment based on those, and whether or not they're really successful in getting peak performance that they're looking for. So again, theory X assumptions, according to McGregor, these managers or leaders assume that people dislike work, and so they have to kind of make them come to work and create an environment where they are micromanaged, if you will. Workers are not ambitious and really prefer direction, so to be more directive in your management, to be more prescriptive in your management, comes out of those kinds of assumptions. Workers avoid responsibility and are not concerned with organizational needs. They must be directed with threat and punishment to really achieve the kind of productivity that you're looking for. Things like disciplining workers for coming in a few minutes late, making sure that they understand that unless you achieve a certain level of performance from them, there may be pay decreases or cuts, those kinds of things. They assume workers are not highly intelligent or creative, and so all of the thinking, all of the creativity, all of the direction must come in a top-down direction to workers, because they will not think creatively or think in ways that will improve the organization on their own. And then they assume that they'll have a hard time finding the kind of workers that they need to get the job done. In contrast, the assumptions of a different kind of manager, what McGregor calls a theory Y manager, sees workers as enjoying work, that work is as natural as play, that people come to work with their own motivation, their own creativity, their own sense of achievement and accomplishment and direction, and that if you give workers an environment that supports their creativity, that supports their self-motivation and their own desire to do well and to be productive and to be effective, that if you surround them with those opportunities, soon you will have a difficulty using all of the human resources and all of the human capital that you have available. So very different perspectives from a manager's point of view in terms of theory X and theory Y. And again, at the bottom of this and the other organizational behavior theories or human resource, human relation theories, really talks about how the assumptions about workers, the assumptions about employees and their connection to the organization, its success or its demise, is really key. Is really key, rather than how you structure it and how you make sure everybody's in a line of command and communication, that you make sure that people are efficient at the one job that you give them. This really is a different look at how do we make sure that our employees, our workers are optimally involved, optimally participating, and getting their own needs for self-gratifying work met. So, kind of to sum all of that up, human resource / organizational behavior theory emphasizes individual or group behavior and their relations in order to determine productivity. The strengths of this perspective certainly are that it helps address leadership, motivation, teamwork, and workplace environment, and how we look at those issues in terms of making organizational change and organizational development and growth. It gives an expanded definition and role of leadership and how the leadership can affect the environment and the productivity in an organization based on their own assumptions about the workforce and their ability to really tap into the resources that the employees, the people who work in the organization have and can contribute. It stresses the importance of relationships and really how leaders and managers need to work with their employees rather than work on them or feel that leaders are the only ones who have a contribution, that it needs to be an interdependency between both leadership and employees and between the productivity of the organization, the development of the organization, and the development of its employees. So that when employees have more of what they need, whether that's education or flexibility in terms of work schedules and work-life balance, that those are the important things, and that people need to find a fit between themselves and the organization, and the organization needs to be concerned about that fit. And then it's a very optimistic theory. Human resource and organizational behavior theory is not so focused on conflict between workers or leadership and workers, management and workers, but really on how leadership can create an environment where workers feel involved, where they feel that their needs are met, and where they feel that they are part of the organization and its success. Hope you enjoy the other videos that you see, and if you have any questions or anything that you feel needs some further clarification, please do email me. I'm glad to provide that. Thanks.